hard to remember what came first. I think very first was going to meet a friend in Leeds and eating magic mushrooms, uh, which was fun and just a bit bizarre more than anything. And then I think second was just on a whim. Like legal highs were always a bit of a joke. Like legal highs meant they didn't work. But somewhere in like the early 2000s or mid 2000s, the legal high stores were starting to sell a lot of drugs, like real drugs, not like bags of herbs that apparently relax you if you know, like kneel down, face east, and say a prayer or something. Um, they were just selling drugs that hadn't been banned yet. Um, so on a whim, I'd gone into a store and asked a question. I can't remember what I asked. I think it was about a product someone else had told me about. And for whatever reason, they didn't have what I was asking about, but they did have some seeds called Hawaiian baby wood rose seeds, which I later learned they contain LSA, which is a lysergic acid very similar to LSD. Excuse me. Um, so I'd kind of like eaten these on the bus on the way home and had a bit of a strange experience. And then another time with three friends, we we bought so four of us in total. We bought 3 packets of them, and I think the first time I ate half the packet, but this time we we split the 3 packets between 4 people, and this is like what I'd describe as like a religious experience that like really stayed with me for like forever. Like I'd I'd be in work. I was working at a bar at the time. It was like a few weeks later, and a friend I hadn't seen for a while had come in, and the first thing he said is like, "What happened to you? You look radiant." And then my uncle also came into the bar, and he was like, "Wow, you've changed." I went to visit my mum, and they were like laughing at me, like wondering why I was like so much more open and friendly and happy. So that was like the biggest experience. And then I'd had like experiences of being like at a festival, like maybe taking like LSD or something, which in that environment is just kind of like more of a party thing. It's kind of different than the other experiences. Um, you could get very similar substances to LSD for absolute pennies. And if you go on eBay and type in LSD paper, you can buy the sheets of paper. So I think maybe for like £80, you could make 400 tabs of something very similar to LSD, which at a festival you could sell one for $10. So, you know, you could turn £80 into £4,000 when you don't have a job. So, uh, that's all I can say about that, really. I had no job. I couldn't find a job. I had a flat that I wasn't happy in. I wasn't happy living in Liverpool with no job. And I got a job that I hated. I only stayed there for like 2 months. I just quit. I was working for like a tourist place, basically, without going too much into it. Um, and I used to cycle to work, and one day cycling to work, like I'm heading down a straight road, and a woman doesn't give way and just knocks me off my bike. So I had like, I think it was 2 or 3 thousand pounds of insurance money. Um, so I was trying to decide what to do with it. I knew that I didn't want to stay where I was, so I did a TEFL certification, which is teaching English as a foreign language. And I don't have a degree. Pretty much every country to get a working visa, you need a degree, with the exceptions of South America, Cambodia, and China. So I was looking at going to China to teach for a year. That was the original plan. Bought some books and did some research and started to master my chopstick skills. Um, but reading about China, it just really put me off. Like reading about hygiene and street vendors would restaurants would just throw oil out into the street, and street vendors will scoop the oil up out the gutter, and they call it gutter grease, and cook the food in that. And just lots of horrible stories. And obviously it's a repressive communist state. So I didn't want to go to China anymore. And I was working for my parents' business to save up some more money. Um, and I'd taken psychedelics before and had crazy experiences with psychedelics of like curing depression and like almost like religious type experiences. And I'd always read a lot about psychedelics because of like the experiences I had. And I'd been reading a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, which is about a guy, I think his name was Rick Strassman, and he he got funding to do research on DMT, and it's a pretty crazy book, um, because he basically had to lie about his reasons to get the funding. He said it was going to help develop like antipsychotic medicine or something, but really he just wanted to get the most pure DMT that's ever been created, and him and his friends to take it. Like if you read between the lines in the book, he says something like, you know, when they used to do research in psychedelics in the 50s, it was always the doctor that went first, and he can't say who the first two people were, but one of them was his best friend. Hmm. So, so that book was really interesting, and I'd read about ayahuasca, which is like a South American sacrament, which is a drink that contains DMT. In the book, he was injecting it into people, and it's a different experience when injected or smoked. It lasts about 5 to 15 minutes. It's a complete out of body experience where people fly up towards the light at the end of the tunnel and come out in an alien world. Whereas with ayahuasca, it's a much longer experience, closer to 4 hours, um, and you're not necessarily out of body. But people with the injected or smoked version, people talk about like meeting aliens and alien worlds and insect races and stuff. Whereas with the drink, the ayahuasca, it's more about being able to see the spirits here. Um, so yeah, so I decided I wasn't going to China. I wasn't going to be a teacher, um, but I was definitely going to go somewhere with the money. So I was Googling ayahuasca retreats, and insects eat me alive. Anywhere where there's mosquitoes, I'm in trouble. So going into the jungle might not have been the best idea for me. And in Peru, in the jungle, it's very difficult to travel to and a lot more expensive and a bit out of my budget. But I could afford to go to Ecuador. So the retreat itself was amazing. Like the site where it was this crazy hippie lady and her husband, and like I really do mean crazy. Um, she actually owns the University of, I think it's called, which, as far as I understand, it's just the university of shit she made up. Um, she actually had, when he was governor, defend her in court to say her university was like legal or just or whatever, because she's from the state of, and at the time was the governor. Um, so she's bought some land in the Andes in Ecuador, like a large piece of land, um, and it's about an hour away from maybe like the third biggest city in Ecuador. So so you land in the airport in a major city, you get a bus like 4 hours to a smaller city, and then the driver drove me an hour into the mountains. So the longer you drive, just the more secluded it becomes, to the point where you're right out in, you know, third world country territory. Because Ecuador has, metropolitan cities or the jungle or little beach towns or these remote communities of natives. A re- you know, there's a bit of everything in Ecuador. So here it's up in the mountains, like just beautiful surroundings, not many people around, really quiet. It's strangely quiet for someone who's lived in cities their whole life. Like you can hear people talking from a long way away because there's so little background noise. You can hear dogs barking like from, I don't know, what seems like 10 kilometers away or something. So a really ideal place, a beautiful place to be. Horrific. um, so it was, it's called Wilca or Yopo snuff, depending on where about in the world you are. And these little brown seeds that we like cook in a pan and make into a powder. And traditionally in the Amazon, we use like a Y-shaped bone from a bird. So it's going up each nostril, and the bone is packed with the snuff, which basically just looks like dry soil. And then the shaman would like just blow it up both your nostrils. Um, so that's what we're doing. This was like an optional extra at the retreat. I think it was like $25. Um, so I go first, and there's like, I think 5 or maybe 6 people sat round in a semicircle and basically fucked 3 of us up and then realized he was given far too much. So the last 2 or 3 or however many, they were okay. So I go first. So he has this thick plastic tube that he's like holding to my nostril, and he says like inhale, and as I'm inhaling through my nose, shoots it up the nose, but it really hurts. Like it really uncomfortable. So your eyes are just like watering like crazy. And then he's like, one more, to the other nostril. I'm like, okay, he's the shaman. He knows what he's doing. It goes up the other one. And then I just feel so bad. Like, within 30 seconds, like, I try and get up to walk to a safe place to be sick. And like, I'm talking, like 5 or 10 meters to like a wall to grab onto and be sick. But I can't keep my balance. I feel like I can't control my body properly. My eyes are streaming. I'm pouring with sweat, and the hallucinations are just completely taken over. So I can't really see where I am anymore. So I've got to this wall. I feel like I want to be sick, but I can't be sick. And I'm trying to call for help, but I can't really get any words out. Kind of like screaming, asking for water. I need water, and then that's all I remember for like maybe 3 hours. Like a lot of what I can tell you about the experience is what other people told me. So there's a guy who's like, he'd been living in India with a yogi for like some years, um, and he was there at the retreat, and he'd gone like second. Um, so he's been trying to help me, but he's like going under, and he's like asking for help, but he doesn't really know where he is. And I've started screaming, basically. Like, I can't remember this, but I'm screaming. And I told you about how quiet it is. You know, if someone screams up in the mountains, it echoes off the mountains, and you can hear it miles away. So, like, the whole local community from miles around knows that someone in that hippie place is having a bit of a bad time. um, so I'm screaming, people are asking for help, people are asking the staff to call an ambulance because something's obviously gone wrong. But the staff, the owners, the crazy hippie woman, refused um, for whatever reason. I don't know if it was an educated reason or not, but they refused to call an ambulance. What they did was carried me inside the community center, which was like a building that you could just chill out in. There was a room upstairs with yoga mats and music and a fireplace. It's quite a big building. So they've carried me inside there, um, where I'm just losing my mind and screaming and stuff. And one thing I can remember during this time is kind of like semi coming to my senses, and I can see people around me and I can hear them talking, but I can't like compute what they're saying. 'Cause I can remember afterwards they were telling me to close my eyes, but at the time I didn't know what that meant. And they wanted me to close the eyes because the shaman wanted to blow like this stuff they have in a bottle, I know, with plants in it, this water, like it's flammable. Like because one thing he does is like, blow it through flames. And so they're telling me to close my eyes, but I don't know how to. So he just blew it anyway, and it was like burning my eyes, like blew this flammable liquid in my eyes. Um, and then the next thing I remember is like changing emotions. Like, imagine the most fear you've ever felt in your life, just to the point where it's driving you crazy, and then it just switched to like a feeling of love, and the most you've ever felt in your life, like you just couldn't understand how powerful it is. And then it switched to like euphoria, and then to calm and peace, and like the emotions would just change on me like every few seconds. And like, as I'm feeling all these emotions, I feel like I'm heading towards something. like something high and up, and it's like a central point. But people keep trying to calm me down, and I feel like they're pulling me away from it. And I'm trying to relax and go to it, and there's something telling me that I need to relax and accept it, and like it's okay. You don't have to be too astonished. And when I finally managed to relax and like accept what was happening, that's when like I kind of like shoot up to this peak and just hit what I can only describe as like complete enlightenment, just complete peace, understanding of everything. And it feels like someone's communicating with me with like positive messages. A lot of it was like so much information you can't remember anything. But like the main thing I remember was talking about like it's given me this information that we are all the same thing. Um, we're just here on Earth experiencing ourselves in a different way. So
Yeah.
if you look at an ant, like you are that ant, and when you die, you're going back to the same thing, and then you're gonna come back and experience yourself in a different way. So in a way, like you are Jesus, like you are Buddha, you are Hitler, you know, this is all just different representations of the same thing. There is only one thing, you know, whether it's a tree, like a cat, you know, we're all one thing.
Yeah.
That was the biggest, like the most memorable message, definitely. So, so I hit this crazy peak, and according to everyone else who was there at this point, I was stood up and I was screaming 4 words as loud as I can, repeatedly. Now, I wrote this down a long time ago and I can't find it, but two of the words were enlightenment and beauty, and I can't remember what the other 2 words were. But I did write it down at the time, but it's just, you know, it was maybe 4 years ago now. No, 5, 6, I don't know. Time's flown. So, you know, I was screaming these words repeatedly for like 2 hours, just the 4 words over and over again. And that was when I was in this state of enlightenment. And then, so I've just kind of just snapped out of it, basically. And, and I'm in the room with everyone around me, like, "Way, he's back." And I'm just like, I don't know what happened. So at the time, I couldn't even remember then that I'd had the yopo blown up my nose because it was like it was early in the morning, like maybe 7 or 8 a.m. that we did it. And I think the night before was ayahuasca. So in my head at the time when I came out of it, all I could remember is taking ayahuasca and then going to bed and then waking up in this room. Like I forgot about the whole ceremony in the morning. When I came out of it, I felt okay until the next day, and then it felt like I had like an MDMA come down that just didn't want to go. Like my head felt all my headache and stuffed, and like I only had like 60% of my brain power. Yeah, I went back and did another whole retreat, but I didn't do the Wilker again. So I'd taken the DMT as ayahuasca, which wasn't very strong, but is a completely different experience because the ayahuasca makes you violently ill at the same time. Like, I could sit on that toilet and I would never stop evacuating things from my ass. It just wouldn't stop. I'd just get bored and go for a walk and then come back later. Uh, and you're being sick. And the first time, I think I did it 3 times, and neither was that strong. Um, I think one time was basically nothing. Nothing happened. Um, but yeah, it's completely different because the hallucinations were like wolves made of smoke and like weird tentacle alien things that like you could talk to. Like the wolf, I could see like something smoky in the distance, and they tell you can ask them questions and stuff. So it said like, "Who are you? Come here," and it kind of like just whooshed up past my face, so I could see that it was like this white smoky wolf, and the tentacle monster thing. Like I was asking her things and nothing was happening. Like asking like telepathically, like thinking the questions at it, and nothing was happening. And I was like, why don't you respond to me? And as I did that, like an eye opened in the middle of it, as if to say like, I know you're there, I'm just ignoring you. So uh, ayahuasca is definitely a completely different experience to all the other psychedelics. And then the Yopo snuff up the nose, again, that's like completely different. So if you take like LSD or magic mushrooms or like a synthetic phenethylamine, they're all pretty similar with different characteristics. It might be stronger, it might be more euphoric. The the visuals might be patterns, or it might be like distorting things. They're all pretty similar in a way, but the DMT was definitely completely different. So this place, they don't really know how to make the ayahuasca properly. Maybe they do now, but shaman, if you're like a hippie type in the like in England, you probably think that like these shamans have magic powers and they're very wise. Uh, but maybe there are people like that somewhere in the world, but good luck finding them. They're usually just people making money. It's just a job. I mean, there's so many stories you can look around of like shamans sexually assaulting people while they're under, um, making bad medicine, that kills people. Like there's a plant, um, I think the chemical is called datura, but it's a deliriant. It's not a psychedelic, but the plant, it's called like something bell. It, it's native to South America. So there was a shaman who was putting the datura in the ayahuasca to make a stronger brew, and it killed someone, and he buried him in the jungle and like didn't inform his family or anything. You know, there's a lot. You know, take the word shaman. Have a very loose interpretation of what you think it actually means. Like this ayahuasca shaman, you know, wore Nike trainers and had an iPhone. You know, he wasn't some guy who lived in the jungle and talked to the spirits. Um, so I actually went to the second retreat this place had, and they wrote on their website as if like they were professionals and they've been doing this for years. The stories of what they do, which was all just made up it was what they imagined the place would be when they opened it. And it was all just lies. So I got there, and there was two people who'd done the first retreat, and the ayahuasca shaman, he had made the ayahuasca and it had no effect on anybody. So the two Californians had actually drove out to their contact, and for the second ayahuasca ceremony they made the ayahuasca. Now, tales of ayahuasca in the jungle is you have a little shot, like a little shot glass of it, and it blasts people to space. So I'm in the first ceremony of the second retreat, and the people who were having a good experience were drinking like three or so pints of it. So he didn't really know how to make the ayahuasca. So even though I did 3 ayahuasca ceremonies and did have some interesting experiences and hallucinations, I wouldn't say I've really had the full experience of ayahuasca. And then the other chemical was the mescaline from the San Pedro cactus. And the thing about that was all about the ceremony. That was a shaman who really does live the life of a shaman. He's not in traditional clothes. He kind of dresses a bit like a rock star. But he definitely believes in what he's doing. It's not he's not trying to make money off tourists. Although that, but he's not trying to extort tourists, you know what I mean? He's so his ceremonies were really good, even though I'm not like a hippie and believe in magic and spirits. It's hard to describe, but definitely emotional and a fun time. And also because, you're on psychedelics, so everything seems crazy anyway. So he did one thing to me where he gets you to sit in front of the fire and look into the fire, and he was like beating a drum on like one side of my body and like humming at the other side, and like him feel like the vibrations of sound like feel like they're permeating your whole body. And it's meant to cleanse me and remove all the bad thoughts or whatever. But even if it doesn't do that, it still felt great. Yeah. I've been here now, I've been living here for almost 3.5 years. I was teaching English in schools, but if anyone wants to come to Ecuador to teach English, just don't, because it's just a nightmare working with the companies. They just don't want to pay you. It's everything any Ecuadorian company has ever told me has been a lie. Lots of promises that don't come true. They're lying to the students. It's just all bullshit. But what I do now is I teach online for an Asian company, so I get treated a lot better. Students, I much prefer teaching online. Other adventures, I've been all over Ecuador, climbed Cotopaxi, which is one of the highest volcanoes on Earth. Yeah, and just enjoyed what the country has to offer. It definitely depends where you are. If you're in a city like Cuenca, it's very safe and it has this huge number of American expats. There's gringo bars where everyone's American, lots of ex-military Americans. Um, you know, it's like people who retire from the UK and go and live in Spain. It'd be a similar experience. Um, but I was in a city called Santo Domingo one time where people haven't seen a white person before, and it is a very dangerous city. You can't go out after night, and that it's an ugly, dirty city. I don't have a single good thing to say about it. And if anyone ever has the opportunity to go to Santo Domingo, just refuse. there's just there's not a single good word to say about the place, the people, anything. You can't drink the water. It just really depends where you are. In the capital city, Quito, like the tourist police will keep the center very safe, but if you're out in like a local person's neighborhood, you can count down the minutes until someone's pulling a gun on you. It just really depends on where you are. Like if you're in Santo Domingo, like if you're walking down the street, cars will just like stop next to you to stare at you. Um, and I worked in an English language school where like 3 members of staff had been robbed like at the door of the school. Um, Average height for men in Ecuador is 5'4", and I'm 6'4". So luckily I'm not an easy target. Whereas if you're a Western girl on their own in a place like that, it's not safe. But then the city I live in now, I walk everywhere. It was only that one night, really. Um, I've never had any trouble. Never. I had one incident with a crazy person, but I think that was more to do with mental illness rather than the danger of the place. And again, Cuenca, where most the expats are, is a very safe place. Well, at the time, I didn't know what was happening. So there was a gang of maybe 40 people on my street making a lot of noise, chanting, and stopping cars from going past. So I'd got in touch with my girlfriend to ask what was going on. And the murder was maybe a 5-minute walk from my house outside a school I used to work in, where the police had him surrounded and he had his pregnant girlfriend hostage with a knife. And the police decided not to shoot, but to try and walk in with shields. And as they got close, he stabbed the woman multiple times with a really large knife. So this mob was, because there was so many Venezuelans here, lots of them homeless. They were going around all the like homeless camps and chasing them away and setting fire to their belongings, storming hostels, attacking people and trashing the rooms. And they were like outside my house for 30 minutes. So at the time, I didn't know were the anti-immigrants or anti-Venezuelans. This is what I really didn't know. So there was a week or so that I couldn't really go anywhere, just to be sure. But it was really only that one night. It was a Sunday night. So the murder was Saturday night. The mob was Sunday night. But just for the next week, just to be sure, if I needed to go anywhere, we'd call a taxi to pick me up, go door to door. Mainly the variety, like because Ecuador has Amazon jungle, the Andes mountains, the beaches, the modern cities, indigenous tribes, you know, for the most part, anywhere you go in the UK, the people are just going to be British people, for the most part. In Ecuador, you can go into the jungle, where people are painting their faces and wearing headdresses and hunting with spears, or you can go to a cosmopolitan city. You know, that's the main difference. It can change a lot. The climate changes a lot. The weather changes a lot. You know, you could be at the beach and it's really hot and humid, or you could be up in the mountains where it's cold, up by the ice. That's the main difference. Definitely the one I told you about with the seeds, the baby woodrose seeds, because that was like completely life changing to the point that, you know, I realized it was a life changing experience when people who didn't know what I'd done, without even listening to me speak, could just see in my face that I'd changed. So that, I'd also say that I don't think that you can just go and buy baby woodrow seeds and that happens to you. You know, it was the right place, the right time, the right situation. I don't know, a bit of luck. It was definitely unexpected. I'm open to both sides of it. There's on YouTube, there's a video of an American policeman on the news. It's about 15 minutes long, and he's arguing for all drugs to be legalized, not decriminalized, but legalized. And he presents a very solid argument. Um, and, you know, if you type into Google Images, what is the most dangerous drug? Alcohol comes out number one in every study. And do we think you should make alcohol illegal? I mean, we've seen what happened in the US when they did make it illegal. You know, the rise of organized crime caused a lot more deaths than alcohol did. It does seem that making it illegal is much more dangerous to us than the actual dangers of the drug. Um, but we don't have a good case study of a country that has made everything legal to see what really happens. Um, we've seen with cannabis in the United States, um, lots of strange things like I think it was Colorado that first made it legal, um, and like violent crime reduced, road traffic accidents reduced, drunk driving was reduced. They made a huge amount of money in taxes, which they pumped back mainly into schools and the education system. So it does make you think, you know, what happens if we do this with all drugs? Um, one state almost passed the legalization of magic mushrooms. I think the vote was like 47% to 53%. So if it's anything like California, when they were voting for cannabis, it'd be like 55-45. The next year it got closer and closer and closer until it passed. So maybe something similar will happen with magic mushrooms. Who knows? And when you search for the most dangerous drugs and you see the charts and it breaks down what the dangers are, the dangers to people, the dangers to society, magic mushrooms and LSD are less dangerous in them studies than cannabis is. It really doesn't, because it hasn't affected me in my life. Um, because I don't feel any repercussions of it. Um, I am meant to, you know, take it easy on my heart. I go to get it scanned every year because one of the problems with Marfan syndrome is the aorta from the heart can dilate. So I have to basically get it measured with either an MRI scan or an ultrasound scan once a year, just to make sure it isn't getting to dangerous levels. And I probably will need to have surgery when it does. It dilates too much, basically. So I probably will need to have surgery at some point in my life. But even if I do push my heart too much, then it just means I have to have the surgery earlier. It's a tricky one to answer. One thing I definitely learned is I can deal with very difficult situations calmly. I had a few times where, like, one time I was having like a panic attack, but I was managed to control my thoughts. I had another strange experience where I was eating an apple and I thought like I'd swallowed my tongue. And basically, like when you swallow and your tongue like does a flick, it just kind of paused at the top, and I thought like I was choking. And I had a moment of panic, and then I knew to myself I needed to relax if I was going to figure this out. And as I relaxed and took a breath through my nose, my tongue relaxed and I realized I wasn't choking. But I think it was definitely a situation where a lot of people feeling that initial burst of panic could have completely panicked, but managed to stay calm through it. Um, had other like moments of clarity on psychedelics where like I realized I needed to do something to change. Like I never used to tell my mother or my father that I loved them until a moment where I realized I needed to do that, which was on psychedelics. The advice would be to research things. Like, I wouldn't say if someone wants to take LSD, I don't think they should walk around a festival asking people for LSD because most LSD is not LSD. There are so many synthetic psychedelics, lots of they're called phenethylamines. Um, the like father of all phenethylamines is mescaline, and they're all synthetic versions of them. There's a book called Phenethylamines I Have Known and Loved by I can't remember the guy's name. He's very famous for synthesizing most of the synthetic drugs for a long time. And he wrote a book where he was synthesizing all these new chemicals and then testing them on himself and on his wife. Uh, but there's hundreds of there's psychedelic amphetamines which can be sold as LSD, phenethylamines that get sold as LSD. You know, if you want to take LSD and you want it to actually be LSD, that's not an easy task to do because there's a very high percentage, depending where you live, who your friends are, who you know, there's a very high percentage that it won't be LSD. It could be something else. So, you know, research, finding a reliable source, and just knowing how to be sensible with them. You know, it's not like finding the strongest psychedelic you can and then taking it at like an electronic music festival because you could be setting yourself up for a really bad experience. You know, probably with all drugs, whether it's alcohol, cannabis, psychedelics, you know, the most important bit of advice you can ever get is you can always take more and you can never take less. So, you know, if you did find that very reliable source of the psychedelic you wanted to take, you'd wanna really buy more than you need. So the first time you can take a dose that's lower than you think you will need, and then a month later, or whatever, you can raise the dose and raise the dose and find the dose that's gonna suit your body and your needs. Because, if you only have 2 tabs of LSD and you think they might be weak, you might think, well, I better take them both, because if I take one and it's not enough, then I only have one left and I know it's not enough, you know. Whereas if you had 10 tabs of LSD, you can quite comfortably take half, knowing that next time, if it was too weak, next time you can take 3/4 or a whole one. If that's not enough, you can keep upping the dose. I do intend on staying in Ecuador permanently because I've been with my girlfriend here for over 2 years now, and I'm looking at buying a house.